Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now this video is not going to be specifically a build one or an unbox one, but rather, as the title suggests, I will be talking about a technique, a chipping technique as the name suggests, which I did and I'm continuing to do on the Yokosuka D4Y2-S, which I'm currently building. Well, one of the models that I'm currently building whilst I'm doing the Stuka videos, so there's that. I know that it should be done by now because winter is over and it's springtime. Anyway, let's talk about this chipping technique which I have, which is really not a technique, but because it's very similar to the hairspray one, but you don't have this mid-layer kind of thing between the two paint layers that you can rehydrate with water to get the top layer off and so on and so forth. It's literally not having to use any hairspray or any other products from AK or Ammo or VMS. I think they have one as well, which is like a chipping liquid that you spray on. It creates like a barrier, a layer between the two paints, and then you can rehydrate that with water so it will lift off and you will get this chip and nick look and feel. And I will be honest, I haven't used the hairspray technique yet because I felt like that putting on this intermittent layer plus doing all the other layers of paints and varnishes and pre-shading, post-shading, shading this, shading that, weathering, wash, varnish, whatever, you know, with smaller scale, like 70-second scale, you can really run the risk of clogging up all the fine detail, the recess detail on the plane's body, and just lose it. That's why I think if you can get away with less layers of stuff on it, you are going to be better off, especially when you do all this before pin wash. Because recess detail is really necessary for the pin wash, so you have all the line details and rivet details nicely popping out. And if those are clogged up with paints and varnishes and whatnot, it's just not going to work now, is it? And of course, by all means, this is not some kind of niche thing and I've reinvented the wheel or something, because in the armor modeling world, this is quite common. You can get these water washable paints, especially like dust ones and like winter white ones, which should mimic the same kind of white paint that Germans and Russians used during the war, and it was winter, so they painted with this water washable paint their tanks so they can conceal them better. And those paints are like water-based acrylics, which don't have that kind of additive in them that will make the paint impervious against water after it fully cured. But let's not beat around the bush anymore and let's see what I actually managed to do. And here it is. Now this is only just the prop now of the plane, because the thing is still in the making. I just wanted to make sure that this idea of mine actually works and I can possibly use it on the whole plane itself. And I think the results speak for themselves. It is a working technique. So what's the catch, you might ask? Well, the catch is that you have to use a certain type of paint, or at least I tried it with a couple, but this one seems to be working the best. And that is, if you have been following my channel, you know that I like to use mission model paints, and yeah, you need to use mission model paints for this one. And the second one is that I use extreme metal from AK, which is an enamel based paint. So when that cures, that is not going to go anywhere, and water literally does nothing to it. So you can easily put anything on top and do whatever. Turning back to mission models, the reason why it works with them is that they use this 3-component system, which means that you have the paint separate, you have the additive. In this case, we are talking about polyurethane, and the thinner separate. So if you just add thinner to the paint when you want to spray paint it, That means that the paint will be delicate and easily be rehydrated with water, because there is nothing to cure and to make it resistant to water. So yeah, this is the beauty of this paint, because whilst other types of paints, other manufacturers like AK, Ammo, and so on and so forth, yes, they are water-based, but they have the additives in them. So when they cure rock solid, and yeah, it's going to be hard to get rehydrated with water. And even if you do, it's more of a smearing kind of experience that you're going to get, not the chip and nick kind of things. And this is the best part of this paint. Yes, you have a steeper learning curve with mission models, because it's going to have this kind of, well, you have to learn how to mix the ratios and so on and so forth, but it is, I think, definitely worth it. But let's not waste any more time, and let's have a look how I did it before we fly away into the sunset with this propeller. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the assembly process and whatnot, because this is not the topic of the video. So here you're going to see me having the assembled propeller blade, priming with Mission Models black primer. Yes, it is a water-based primer, and one might think that, do you want to put down water-based primer underneath an enamel paint, because the extreme metal that I'm going to use next is going to be an enamel one. But trust me, it's not a problem. After it's fully cured, it shouldn't have any kind of crazy reaction with anything. It is going to look nice. And what I like about, especially with this Mission Models black primer, that it has a bit of a satin finish. It's almost like glossy, but not that much. So it's really good as a base for metal paints as well. So after the black primer has fully cured, we move on and use matte aluminum from AK Extreme Metals. And as I said, this is an enamel based paint. It's really tough and durable after it has fully cured, and usually it's like 10-15 minutes in and it's well cured, but I usually leave it for a couple of hours before I do anything else. But because I'm going to put water-based acrylic on top, I am not too fussed about having any kind of issues between the paint layers, because they are just two different worlds altogether, and the water-based acrylic is not going to do any kind of damage to this one. And as an added bonus, this paint dries to this almost glossy finish, which makes it much easier to lift off the Mission Model paint from its surface. Now we go and paint the propeller with Japanese propeller brown from Mission Models, of course. And the main thing is here that we take our time and put on multiple thin coats. We don't rush, we let it dry a bit. Even use your airbrush to dry a bit the surface before you put on the next layer, because this paint now is very runny, it can pool easily, and we don't want to have that. So without the polyurethane additive, it can be very runny, very watery in consistency. And this is why you take your time and take it slow until you build up the desired consistency of the paint. Especially the very first layer on such a glossy surface as what you get with the extreme metal paint underneath, it's very crucial that the very first layer you do a bit of dusting, so you don't go on really close up and just smother it with paint, but you do like a far away spraying and dust the surface, so then those dried paint particles will help for the layers coming afterwards to grip onto the surface a bit better. Now I'm going to do my very first chipping test. As you can see, I haven't done the yellow stripes at the top of the prop blades because first I just wanted to try this out and make sure that it works and it gives a good result on the propeller hubcap first. After this, I am going to do the rest. It's just that I am testing it here now because if it doesn't work, I'm going to wash the whole thing off and just do a proper paint job on it and be done with. But that's not the case. So anyway, let's continue. One thing that what I want to say here is that don't use a towel or like anything else to get the excess water off from the paintbrush, because what you will get is that a lot of water will leave the paintbrush and it's not going to work that well. So use your hand, just get a lot of water out of the paintbrush. Like here I tried it after I used the tissue paper and there is not much water now on the paintbrush, so I will need to load it up a bit more, but rather use your hand than a napkin or something. Of course, make sure that you regularly wipe off the paint which was lifted up by the brush, because this is water-based acrylic, so it's going to rehydrate it in a way that you can smear it. So just take your time, just do these dabbing motions and stuff like that. Just try to avoid doing like painting motions, so to avoid smearing the paint. And of course, this is a very worn brush that I'm using, and the bristles are quite strong and stiff. It's easy to do this dabbing motion with it, as you can see here. And again, it is very delicate, so be very careful, take your time, don't rush, just nice and slow. There is no need to be quick about this. And when you feel like that there is too much water somewhere and it's pooling a bit or something, just leave it. Leave the paint alone, leave it to dry again. And when you see that it's dry enough, then go and work again on it. But yeah, just nice and steady wins the race. And of course, before I forget, there is one very crucial thing. I think it's crucial, is that I left the paint fully dry and cure for 24 hours. I think this is very, very, very important as well, because you don't want the paint to be still soft and malleable, because then you're going to just smear it. Another big question of mine was whether this paint will hold up against masking tapes, because the paint is very delicate and it's on a glossy surface, so it's a good test to see whether I should continue with this whole endeavor or not. And I also had to mask off those yellow stripes on the propeller blades in this instance, so that's what I did. And of course I used the usual method to get most of the tackiness of the masking tape by taping it onto my hand a couple of times to get that tackiness, that strong stickiness off of it, just to make sure that it's not going to lift off any of the paint. And another question I needed an answer for is that whether this paint is going to work the same way or behave the same way when it has multiple layers on it. Because here now with these orange, yes, I said yellow before a couple of times, but actually these are orange stripes or orangish stripes on these Japanese propellers. Anyway, it's going to have 3 layers. It's going to have this propeller brown, it's going to have white underneath to make this orange color pop a bit more, and then it's going to have the orange on it. So I really need to know whether it's going to work if there are multiple layers of paint on it. And luckily, the answer to my question whether the paint can withstand the masking tape or not is a resounding yes, it can. As you can see, it peels off without any problem, although I am very careful. I should say I am very careful and very anxious at this point, making sure that, oh my god, everything stays nice on the surface, because if not, then all was for nothing and I have to go with my regular setup where I would use the sponge technique to do the chipping. But as you can see, everything turns out quite well and you can use masking tape on it. Although this is not a perfect test for that because the surface is quite small, but I'm going to do the whole body of the plane. Now that's going to be something. I already can feel the anxiety for that, and yeah, that is going to be the main test, but for now I am quite happy how it turned out. I also painted the back of the propeller blades with tire black to give that blackish kind of anti-glare coat that they had on the propeller blades. And as you can see, it turned out well. The chipping technique works, and although I wasn't going to town on the yellow stripes that much, getting the edges cleaned off and then getting into the yellow a bit as well, I think it was quite good. And as you can see, there is quite some paint that I managed to scrape off. So you need to have your brush cleaned all the time. Especially because when you have multiple paints like that, you are running the risk that you mix the paints together and then you're going to get a different color on there. So you want to make sure that you take it off of the brush as soon as possible. After I finished all the chipping and I let it rest again, the whole paint, I let it rest for a couple of hours. I gave a good coat of VMS satin varnish to the propellers, and after that I started to do my usual thing with the decals, applying them with microset and microsol. This was also a good test to see whether the varnish can give the extra stability and toughness to the paint without the polyurethane additive added into it to begin with. And the answer is yes. The whole finished article is quite durable and it's okay to put on decals on it and even use microset and microsol. It's not going to eat into it, but just make sure that you have a good coverage and you applied varnish everywhere. And of course, after finishing decaling, I applied another coat of satin varnish to seal the deal and make the edges of the decals go away. And there you have it. This is how it looks. I'm quite happy with the result, but again, it is something that you have to keep in mind, and I have to keep in mind, that this is just the propeller and not the whole plane. So it might be that when I'm doing the whole plane, everything goes wrong and I will have to start over the whole thing, at least on the plane. And another thing that I would say that it's a positive, that if you go wrong here, you just wash the whole thing off with running water and the paint will be washed off without a trace. And yeah, I think this is a viable solution. I don't know if anyone else has tried it before or not. I really didn't research it to see if anyone did this a similar way as I did it here. I might be the first, but I highly doubt it. But I am hoping that you learned something today and you might apply this in your future projects. And if so, do let me know. Or if you have done it, do let me know as well. Other than that, it's really what I have for you in this video. There's nothing else. The project is still ongoing. This Fine Molds Yokosuka D4Y2 is still in the making. I am close to finishing everything up on the body, and it's going to be paint time, which will be very anxiety-fueled situation, but I think it's going to be alright. And with that, let's fly into the blue yonder. Please like and subscribe, and of course, see you on the next one. Bye bye.